I can still see the crowds running along. There was a feeling that he was one of us. That's the feeling you got.
I think it really has to be seen as in the case of a successful son coming back.
When he put the hand out to you, you felt very, very special.
On the morning of June 27th, the people of New Ross woke early as usual. But this day was going to be anything but usual. Farmers got their work done early. All non-essential businesses were closed, and the school children dressed up in their special sports uniforms, white shirt and trousers with a red tie, and headed not to the classroom, but to the dewy pitch of O'Kennedy GAA Park to welcome home Ross's most famous son. President Kennedy and his entourage would arrive in New Ross via helicopter, a rare sight and sound in 1963. The town was keen to give him a welcome that he would never forget. Thus it was decided that the students of the CBS primary school would lie on the pitch and spell out Céad Míle Fáilte. This would be President Kennedy's first glimpse of New Ross since his initial, far more unassuming visit to the town in 1947. It wasn't just the townspeople that were welcoming a son. Kennedy himself had a sense of coming home. Pat Lawler, a local farmer, was one of the CBS students that waited patiently on the cold, wet pitch that June morning.
We used to have this drill every summer, ourselves, it was 5th and 6th class. Mm-hmm. And it was all Céad Míle Fáilte with bodies. And it was a sea now could take 3 bodies, very big, he probably saw this in the air, come Céad Míle Fáilte. And I was a fodder, out on my own, and it was... the wind, it was cold. You're laying on the ground now, with only a shirt on you and slacks, trousers and runners, And that time now, the uniform was white trousers, white shirt and a red tie, The red and white was the Ross colours, CBS colours anyway, And Brother Murphy was in charge. He was mostly over the primary school, We were waiting for about an hour and a half, I'd say. At least lying down, and it looked like 3 hours we were there, So eventually 2 helicopters came. We thought it was him was coming, so it was probably security and lads were in the cars and all this, and they flew over and landed out in the seemingly is the CBS Park as well. The underhurl across the road at back of Kelly's there, Michael Kelly's there, and so next thing, about 10 minutes after, he came in his helicopter and he landed right in the park. And I remember the propellers flying around and a guard going over to the helicopter and it blew off his cap and it flew the whole way over to the wall in the park, with the speed of propellers. And so he got out of the car, out of the helicopter and walked over to the side. We got hooked in and went in a drill, a row, and went off over to the side into the seats, where the people sit at the matches, we'd say, and he was up on the green on the grass marching up over us a little bit, and we sang the boys of Wexford for him, and Kelly, the boy from Killaan. He spoke to, a few minutes, I forget now what he did say to us, so long ago, and it was mostly only brothers and photographers were there, and bodyguards, in and us, in the park, And then there was a big rush out. I remember seeing his car coming out of the other park, when he was going off, and we racing down the town to get a glimpse of him blowing the key.
Eamon Walsh, owner of Colonial Stores in New Ross, and carpenter Tony Brennan were also students of the CBS primary. Like all the students, they were caught up in the excitement of the day and couldn't wait to see the helicopters.
I think we were laying down in preparation, for the helicopter, because it was supposed to be seen from the helicopter.
So how long were you on the ground?
Could be 10 minutes, really.
Probably about 3 weeks, I'd say.
But it was wet. People said it was wet.
The grass was wet, yeah.
After President Kennedy landed, he greeted the children, who entertained him by singing The Boys of Wexford and Kelly, the boy from Killaan. The Boys of Wexford being the president's favourite song, and he couldn't resist joining in. He then spoke briefly to the crowd before he got into his car to make his way through the town and onto the quay. Jim Franklin from Old Ross was a member of the FCA at the time. He was stationed in Kilkenny and off duty that day, but was unexpectedly offered a lift to New Ross on one of the helicopters that escorted the presidential party into O'Kennedy Park. After disembarking the helicopter, Jim suddenly found himself face to face with the president.
We got him, we were pushed around, like, you know, and there were hundreds of security men there, like, you know. But we pushed away anyway before he got into the car. We got to the car before he got in, like, you know. He just shook hands with us. And we didn't see him anymore then when we went into the quay. I was up to hearing so much about him. I was a bit shy at the time as well.
The children were all to stay at the GAA park, but Eamon and Tony, as well as all the other children, weren't content to stay put.
All the kids were brought up there to keep them there. That was my opinion on the day. And they tried not to let us out. But we physically broke out, really. I think that was the idea.
Like you were told not to go down to town.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And they kind of locked the door, we brazed it open and all that, but then we followed the car down. But I think that was the idea, not to have kids running around the town.
With the cars and so on.
Yeah.
And the fact that we had the white gear on was a bit of a giveaway if you were seen, you know what I mean?
Eamon Walsh followed the motorcade out of the park and ran alongside President Kennedy's car all the way down to the quay.
Well, I was the whole way down Craywell, myself and Kieran Forley, right down beside him, following the whole way down. It's a memory of me that wouldn't be just chatting away, and Gerald Donovan and like that with the walking stick, and beside Kennedy and Frank Aiken, I think, was it? No, myself and Kieran Foley decided to follow him out Douglastown on foot. But we got as far as Newtown and said, oops. And in fairness now to Kieran, he only did it because I said it and he was looking at me.
Another person in the park that day was Jimmy Fitzgibbon.
I lived in New Ross all my life, except for a number of years I spent in England. Before I got married, I've been married for 50 years this year. And I was in New Ross on the morning that Kennedy arrived. I was a member of the New Ross Fire Brigade at the time, and we were briefed beforehand that this helicopter was coming and that it needed fire cover for it, and we did several drills up around the old Kennedy Park in preparation for this great day. And we were there on the day the helicopter landed. The president got out and he shook hands with us and left the park. But little did he know at the time that if anything had happened to that helicopter, all we had was this old Fire Angus truck cast off from the Dublin Fire Brigade, which was a wartime unit. It had 100 gallons of water and it had a few hoses, but the hoses wouldn't reach the nearest hydrant, which was nearly a mile away in the Irish town. So it's a good job there was no fire on the helicopter that morning, or we wouldn't be able to do anything about it.
But that was only the beginning of Jimmy's day.
Well, it was the busiest day of my life because that started off, I had a milk round in New Ross at that time, and because of the security, I had to be off the town by 8 o'clock in the morning. And then we had a restaurant in town. We built a new restaurant, just opened just before Kennedy came. And the night before Kennedy's arrival, we got an order for 1,000 sandwiches to feed the guards. So we had we travelled the country to get sliced pans and ham. It had to be ham sandwiches, 1,000, and have them ready for a collection to feed these hundreds of guards that were coming to protect the president. And in the evening I finished up by going out and picking up a lady and gentleman who had been in Douglastown. You see, I was the only one who had a license to travel around the town. Everybody else were not allowed to drive because of security. You had to have a special permission to. So I had, because of the milk round in the morning, because of the fire brigade, I was able to. So I brought in Mr. and Mrs. Quigley, or Dr. and Mrs. Quigley.
While Jimmy tended to his many responsibilities, his mother, Bridget Lawler, owner and operator of the takeaway restaurant, left her business briefly to stand on the platform with President Kennedy. Bridget had been the first woman chairman of New Ross Town Council in the late 1940s, and Kennedy himself requested her presence on the VIP platform.
So he had a great influence on the town and on us as a family anyway, you know. And I went to Boston there a number of years ago, and I was really, really delighted to see a photograph of my mother in the Kennedy Library, you know, because she was on the platform here the day he arrived. So to see her photograph in Boston was moving. She was the first lady, a female member of the New Ross Urban District Council. She was the first woman chairman of the member of the Municipal Authority Association of Ireland, first woman member. She was the first chairman of the Municipal Authority Association, woman chairman. So she was there in her own right. She wasn't very long speaking to him at all, if she spoke to him at all, because she was on the platform, and as soon as there was must be 100 people on the platform, and she was not a current member. All she was worried about was across the road was the Penguin Fish and Chip Shop, and to get back up there and start making some money.
Jim Sutton, a young member of the FCA, was in position down in the town and watched the motorcade as it came through the streets of New Ross and onto the quay.
And then the cavalcade proceeded down Craywell and into John Street, and the streets were crowded, were lined with people. But as he passed by, many of the people ran to keep up with the excitement. So you had a kind of a stampede after the car, which wasn't travelling very fast anyway. So everybody became involved, became excited. There was a huge crowd on the quay by the time that they finally disembarked from their cars and got on the stage. But there was an air of excitement in the town, which I can hardly remember ever happening before.
Jim was near the VIP platform as the dignitaries assembled. He was overwhelmed by JFK's presence.
I was about 5 or 6 rows from the front of in front of the platform on which the VIPs were appearing, and I'll always remember Kennedy was so relaxed. It was as if he was at home. He spoke to people in a most relaxed and friendly way, and he was absolutely dripping with charisma and personality in a very easy way. And the things I remember particularly about his appearances, he was beautifully tanned. Now, back in the 1960s, suntan was only the few who were able to go abroad on holidays, which weren't very many, had a suntan. The rest of us were white, and maybe in the summertime we got a bit red with the sun, but suntan was something that you saw on the films. But suddenly here was this beautiful American gentleman with a magnificent suntan, similar to what you see nowadays on virtually every girl you pass, because it's a fashion nowadays to be tanned. But at that time, the most remarkable thing I remember about him was his suntan, and he had huge white teeth. Beautiful looking man, white teeth, suntan, and auburn hair, standing in his car and standing on the platform and waving. And I think that's the memory that anybody that saw him that day will probably carry.
Perhaps the most famous story of the day, locally, nationally and internationally, was the perceived failure of the PA system as Andy Minahan began to speak. His son Owen recounts the famous moment.
Just when Andy went to the microphone to welcome Kennedy, or to get the thing going, because that was the main event and the people were all there on the quay and they'd come from far and wide and whatever. But when he was just there ready to get the microphone to work, the microphone didn't work and whatever. So he ended up shouting into the microphone, and he had a big booming voice anyhow. So he was shouting to the microphone to see if it was working and so on, and to see if people could hear far and wide. Now he'd be able to shout to 10,000 people anyhow, but while he was doing that, he didn't realise there was only the local one, telephone, microphone, that didn't work. All the television things were working, so he was shouting into the telephone, or should I say, into the television sets around the United States and around the world and whatever with people, and so he got their attention immediately with the shout saying, "Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Some pressman has walked on this."
But from his vantage point, Jim Sutton could see the very reason for the sudden failure.
The reason for the failure of the PA system was that the stage had been surrounded by these security men that had accompanied the president. Serious-looking, grim-looking men, most of them in trench coats, watching everything. And just as Andy started to speak, one of them noticed a motor car battery under the stage, under the president's feet, with wires, cables coming out of it. And of course the man immediately thought, bomb, what danger of a bomb. So he dived in and tore the leads off the off the battery. And the poor man that had supplied and had erected the PA system nearly had a heart attack, for a local man, and he of course came to the site immediately, and the whole thing was sorted out in a minute, and the leaves were put back on, and away it went. But the poor man, he didn't know how he was going to be thrown into the river. The poor man that owned the site, he didn't know how he was going to be thrown into the river, run out of town, and certainly had it failed that day, he would have made history in the wrong kind of a way.
May Franklin was one of the many people that thronged the quay that day to hear the President speak.
We went down, and an aunt of mine came in from Cool in Campoile. We went down after dinner, but when we went down, this was what we saw. Just the whole place was full, the whole quay. You couldn't even get near this part here. You know, but I know my father was down there, and he was after being down there since morning. And there was another man, the man De Fatty was his name, up in Cross Lane. This old lady was there. Remember the time they used to be wearing the shawls, them times. And she was standing right alongside of my father, and she said, they got talking anyway, and she said to him, "If I don't get to shake hands with him, nobody will," she said, "because I'm here since last night, holding up this place here," she said. And she said, "If you get to do it," well, because she said, "I'll surely get to do it." So because he just lucky when he was going away, he came their way. Andy Fatty, my father, shook hands with him, and he was just moving away, and my father said to him, just for a quick moment, because they know these fellas that be watching him wouldn't leave him a minute. My father said to the President, he said, "Before you move any further," he said, "President," he said, "would you ever shake hands with this woman? She's been here, standing, since last night," he said, "waiting to see you," he said. So, by God, I will, he said, "if I ever shook hands with anyone," he said, "I'll shake hands with her now." So he did too. So she was delighted. Oh, she was all praised for him and all, everything, like, you know, but the poor operator, whoever she was now, he never found out her name, but I know she used to wear a shawl, but sure, it could be any the women that time had the shawls and in wearing them, you know.
But it wasn't just the thousands of locals that witnessed his speech. Millions of viewers from around the world were transported to his ancestral home due to the recent technology of television.
There was a lot of cameras now around the quay, all around the quay in different parts of it, up at the other end, the far end, and especially now all around where the outside of the LNN there, well, Super Valley, we call the Super Valley at that time.
Providing entertainment for the occasion was the local Cayley band, Jim Sutton.
They had the local Cayley band on site. I don't know that I think they may appear on film, I don't know, but they were preparing and they played on the occasion. One of my neighbours had emigrated to America, and he lived in Sacramento in California, and on the occasion when Kennedy was on the stage having spoken, there was a slight pause, and the Cayley band struck up, and this man's sister subsequently told me that he was in Sacramento in California, and suddenly the camera panned in on his father, an old man with a cap riding, and Pete jumped up and he said, "Look at Daddy," and he pointed far away in America. He pointed to him on the screen. Everybody had to stop what they were doing and watch Daddy playing his fiddle.
The tea party at his ancestral home in Duncanstown was the highlight of the visit to Ireland, and is well documented and often recalled. But it wasn't his first cup of tea with his cousin Mary Ryan. He popped in 15 years earlier after his election to the US Senate. But the memory of the visit was perhaps fresher in his mind than hers.
We want to express our thanks to Mrs. Ryan, who she and her friends who cooked all this. I hope everybody who came with us from the country, the United States, all the press and everything will take something, because this was a great effort on their part. We promise we'll come only once every 10 years. And as I said inside, we want to drink a cup of tea to all the Kennedys who went, and all the Kennedys who stayed.
And then he was off, back into his helicopter and into the sky. But not before promising to return once again, but this time with Jackie and the children. And although he would spend another 2 days in Ireland before returning to Washington to concentrate on the many domestic and foreign issues that plagued his presidency, he would never forget the family reunion that he and his sisters, Jean and Eunice, had experienced. The next day, Jim Sutton drove JFK's cousin, Marianne Ryan, back to Dublin.
And I knew Marianne fairly well, and she was going back to Dublin the following day after the President's visit. And I gave her a lift back. And she said to me, would you like an autographed photograph of the President? And as much out of politeness as anything else, I said I'd love one. And I thought no more about it. And about 3 months later, I got a head and shoulders of the President with regards to Jim Sutton, President Kennedy. And you can actually see the ink standing out on it. It was actually signed by hand, which I have at home, and I can't find it at the moment, but it's safely at home somewhere.
Although not officially family, President Kennedy had a very special kinship with Andy Minahan too. A few months later, the Minahan family received a personal letter and a very special gift from the US President himself.
President Kennedy sent a photograph of himself and my fellow Andy, the two of them on the quay, and it was with a leather-bound frame with the crest of the President of America on it, and he also, and written on it was in appreciation to Andy Minahan, in appreciation of the visit and warm regards from John F. Kennedy. So, but signed by the Kennedy himself, and that came just halfway between the visit sort of thing and when he was assassinated. He also sent at that time a silver cigarette case, which was one for the desk or the table sort of thing. But so it was a silver cigarette case with the presidential crest on the front of it as well. And one of these table ones to take about 50, big 50 cigarettes or whatever. And my father wasn't much of a smoker. I think he smoked about 2 cigarettes in a day, if at all, at that time. So the cigarette case wasn't much used to him.
New Ross slowly got back into its normal routine, but there was a new energy in the town now, an energy that placed them over and above any other place in Ireland, or indeed the world, in their opinion. For the community of New Ross had a sense of pride like never before.